Hello everyone, I'm the Hammer Game Channel. Welcome back to the New Order, the last days of Europe, where today we are beginning afresh with a new nation, and that nation is the Kingdom of England. We are, however, not going to be sticking with with the Collaborationists government. That is, they're getting in the bin as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and read the lore behind England. Of Englishmen in the rest of the world, what is there to say but that they invaded most of it at one point or another? Perhaps then it is inevitable that they would be subjugated to the same depredations that inflicted thousands of nations at the hands of Germany. English new and untested era is not the same place as it once was. For instead of the traditional power structures, it is led by a loose alliance of all those who want no more war with the Reich, the Royal Party. Under Alec Douglas Home, the party has recovered greatly from the miserable days of the war and the chaos following the 1953 led an uprising by communist revolutionaries. Home leads the moderate faction, the RP, the largest portion of the coalition dedicated more to stability than any true ideals beyond that. At his side is Harold Macmillan and the reformists, who nominally adhered to the democratic principles but are willing to compromise with Home for the good of England. Also present are hardliners, dedicated fascists led by Arthur Kenneth Chesterton, who advocates for a state closer to the German model. Despite the differences, all three of these groups have been willing to work together for the sake of England's recovery. But recovery doesn't mean stability, for another faction exists within England, the HMMLR. Her Majesty's Loyal Resistance is a network of several different rebel groups, all answering to one unknown man, allegedly called the Boss, who we know is definitely called Claude Auchinleck, surely. The organisation itself can be traced back to the aftermath of the Second World War, but it wasn't until the defeat and nigh annihilation of the Communist Party of Great Britain at the Third Battle of Cable Street that HMMLR rose to the fore of the English rebel organisations. HMMLR, proper and dedicated to the return of the person they believe is the rightful monarch of England, Queen Elizabeth II. A somewhat conservative organisation, it is surprising that they allied with the second largest faction, the Left Resistance. Led by Bill Alexander, a veteran of the West Russian War, Spanish Civil War, and a dozen wars in between, along with being one of the few notable survivors of the Third Cable Street, the Left Resistance are an electric mix of communist, socialists, and even most of the old Labour Party united under a common banner and cause. The third piece of the puzzle can be found in David Stirling and the Commandos, the only rebel group to be in active rebellion from the beginning of the Second World War, where he deserted. Stirling's Commandos are the smallest of the three major parts of the HMMLR, but also the best trained and equipped. What sets them apart from their brethren, however, is their fierce republicanism and unquenchable desire for vengeance upon the traitors to England. These two factions will eventually have to face off, though in what circumstances and when remains to be seen. But the victor will have an opportunity to decide not just the fate of England, but potentially the fate of Britain as well. Features: decide the fate of England through elections and politicking. You reunite the Isles for better or worse. Play your part in the great game between the Reich and OFN. England prevails. Tally ho! Let's get going, shall we? So, tick tock, tick tock. The surrender of the United Kingdom at the end of the war, unfortunately, was not enough to keep dissidents quiet in England. Though many attempted conspiracies have been crushed over the years, and it looked like we might finally be past the dark times following the Third Battle of Cable Street, in recent years a new organisation has waged war from the shadows. Potentially titled Her Majesty's Most Loyal Resistance, they, along with the Left Resistance, have been a thorn in our side like none other. Assassinations, falsified anti-government propaganda, and even bombings by HMMLR have become increasingly common, and things are starting to get out of hand. But the King is set to make a speech on the matter soon, which hopefully will help us turn public opinion to our point of view. Guest event: The Copper and the Rebel. Oh, come on, we're behind in tech. Right, we'll spend some time upgrading those. How are we doing for research? Let's get the transistor computer. And we'll get batch production methods too. We get free civvies. Good. So we're going to go ahead and build some military factories in the north. We start off with 14 factories. That's not terrible. We're going to need all of this. All the good stuff. Alright, we'll start off with that. We'll get Fighter 1, close air support, the Lancaster. I'm presuming we have the IVFs. IFV, sorry. IVF, great, doing great. So kangaroo, APC, motorized equipment. Right, I think that's going to be everything. We'll unpause and we'll go to full speed. We'll see if it comes up saying we're missing anything. I don't think we are. Good. I think what we'll do for the meantime is just build up submarines. Submarines and convoys is what we'll work on. Alright, and we have 19 divisions. Guess we'll just leave them sitting there because, well, we're not going to be doing much. Right, we'll go 3. There we go, that'll do for the time being. How are we looking logistics-wise? We're looking fine, actually. We're looking good. Right, so, general-wise, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. You betrayed us. You betrayed us all. Any other names you recognise in here? No, I don't recognise any of those guys. They're not my usual boys that I use. Oh. TikTok's done. Oh gosh, the copper and the rebel. Timothy O'Flaherty considered himself about as normal as one could be under the circumstances. He left school once he could read and write, followed his dad into being a bobby once he met the age requirements, got to the rank of inspector, and even found a nice lass to settle down with. But the rest of the world, Tim happened to think the rest of the world was normal at all. The police hadn't changed so much when the Germans invaded. Tim hadn't really gotten a chance to fight since London surrendered before the Germans reached his position. But he'd known more than a few good men who hadn't made it past the day. In his eyes, what had come after that had been worse, the London uprising. The constant terrorism not by Fenians, but by local Englishmen against the German tyranny. And Tim found himself having to stop them. But whatever he thought of the government, they had a point. The rebels winning might well end in the Germans coming back, and for his wife and daughter's sake, he'd do anything to prevent that. Passing Inspector O'Flaherty was Griselda Robbins, a young woman who the police were ubiquitous in London, would probably put a great amount of effort in to find if only knew who she was. Griselda had grown up under the boot, watched the Germans kill her friends in the London uprising, watched her brother beg on the streets because he couldn't earn a living with his leg blown off. She heard it in the pub, and no matter what the government said, the Germans hadn't even left. No one had been to Cornwall without a permit in recent times after all. Which was why she joined HMMLR. It hadn't been easy. Griselda had followed rumours for months before they noticed her, and after she passed the test of loyalty, she ended up joining the local cell. London might be home for the traitors after all, but they were an arrogant bunch, didn't even notice these moving beneath their feet. Griselda fought for her brother, for her father who never returned from the war, but most of all, she fought for a free England. The die is cast. So we could go with the Prime Minister Speaks, which will enable gameplay for the perspective of the government, which includes preparing a safe speech for Edward. Will give us the ability to monitor the extent of HMMLR's territorial control via the decision menu. Yes, man, a plan. The king unloved. We're going to do the state beneath their feet. Her Majesty's most loyal resistance, a catch-all term for a problem, has eluded solutions for nigh on 20 years. The current organisation is probably better described as a combination of 3. Dave Stirling and his Commandos are the largest rogue military unit in England, which didn't surrender following the war, and the only one still active in England proper. But Alexander and the left resistance are a agglomeration of assorted leftist partisans and Labour supporters, though they might not be as influential as the CPGB that perished at the Third Cable Street. Infuriatingly, I don't know. However, the original HML leader is unknown. Some spy master in the shadows, no doubt, if he even still lives. But somehow managed to get almost every major partisan organisation in England to answer to him despite ideological differences. This organisation is a thorn in our side. We must excise it. We'll enable gameplay for the perspective of the HMMLR, which includes sabotaging Edward's speech. Will give us the ability to monitor the extent of the government's territorial control via the decision menu. Guess event hidden beneath their feet. Let's do it. We are not going to stick with the Collaborationists. They can get in the bin. Oh, the House of Commons. Okay. Government stability 67%. Oh, we are going to destroy that. Alright, underneath our feet. Griselda is part of one of the only HMMLR cells in Silent City proper, and probably the only one which wasn't outright underground. At first she'd been just a regular member, but with people being shuffled around, she'd ended up being the cell leader rather than just another grunt. Most of our days consisted of working as a barmaid at one of the HMMLR friendly establishments, listening in on conversations and keeping an eye out for new recruits. Every now and then, though, her cell would get some real work, smuggling out firearms and explosives or even important people to cells in other parts of the country. And of course, sometimes the higher-ups wanted her to do something. As far as Griselda knew, she'd answered to whoever coordinated London proper, but she only got messages by code or dead drop, often both, all in order to do her part for the cause. If she were to be honest with herself, Griselda wasn't that fussed on the return of the Queen, or whatever the official line was. Griselda wanted a bit of vengeance against those who had betrayed England. And if the HMMLR were the ones offering, who was she to turn them down? She was part of the fight for freedom, and she would die for it if need be. The motivations of a person can be as simple as a knife, or complex as a maze. Right, the gears move. We get 2,000 weapons. The funny thing about any moving machine, right, is that it keeps moving, even when you take your hand off the pedal, like a car going downhill. The collaborationists folks probably think they know our strengths, but they look in the countryside and the hills with no luck, save for when Sterling's lads give him what for. Nah. See, we're everywhere. We watch from our workbenches when the troops put down riots. We store guns in the attics when they aren't looking. We even recruit a couple of ones only in because they don't know better. Of course, now that the head traitor is making a speech, we can't just not go and give our opinion now, can we? It'd be downright rude. We're in the street as the boss has a plan. The old war hero Auchinleck. Bet they'd love to know that. Well, we'll give them a speech to remember most likely. One they'll never, ever forget. Right, so we got control in the north, disputed in here. We definitely want to get control of there. Oh, we can improve relations. Reach out to USA politicians. Oh. Can we not reach out to Scotland? A King's speech. The Collaborationists government is like nothing stays secret for long, and anything can be bought for a price. In this case, the boss will receive information that traitor King Edward is going to be making a speech to calm the nation to his time, in this time of uncertainty. How quaint. Well, it just won't do to have our organisation be unrepresented at this momentous occasion. Indeed, we ought to send representatives of our own to the proceedings. Heavily armed representatives. Of course, this isn't the kind of action that could take place without extensive planning. HMMLR needs to prepare our response to the Collaborationist attempts to hide the truth of how they have failed England as people. With some luck, our message will ring out forever. Let's go ahead. And let's info. The King is planning to give his wonderful speech from the Buckingham Palace. We know this for certain. If we have enough of our people next to the King, the chance to do a great show is greater for us. Both periodic change of the safety of the future speech and the safety of the future speech itself will change by random amount. It will change for better, of course, but by predictable amount. Boom. Unpredictable amount, rather. Let's do it. And what we'll also do is... naturally, to conduct any serious operations requires weapons. This means rifles, grenades, ammunition, etc. We do prepare ourselves for a general uprising as well, which will require arming even more people than we do now. One way to get this is through legally questionable means, namely gun trade. We can get guns through OFN countries using contacts friendly to us. However, the actual number of our guns that get through is dependent on how stable Northern England is. The higher the state stability is in Newcastle, Lancashire and Yorkshire, the higher the chance of our guns getting through, and less will be lost to the government. Right. It's going to be very unlikely that we're able to kick them out of those. If we can get into some of the disputed territories, it's going to be very good for us. Small gun shipment. Pro HMLR tours. Tour the oh, let's do that. So multiple small OFN relation boosts over time. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, it's time to start preparing ourselves. We do have a couple of years. Oh, Borman's been named the successor. Ah, the stirrings of a plan. No one quite knew who the boss actually was. Oh, to be sure, everyone knew of Mad David Sterling and the Red General Alexander. One has refused to surrender with the rest of the army and had fought on since the end of the war. And the other was only the most notorious communist to escape Gable Street. So some of Griselda's self thought those two were the leaders and the boss was a smokescreen. A made-up name to keep the traitors focused on something that wasn't real. Griselda personally thought that unlikely. She looked at the two wiry figure of Sterling alongside a tall, strong-looking Alexander. Despite the way they looked over the map of London City, all she could think was she obviously didn't like each other very much. It was the small things, the way Sterling grimaced when Alexander rebuked his idea of placing dynamite on the bridge on account of his casualties, or Alexander frowned when Sterling suggested his men would be better suited to an open attempt on the king than a motley collection of men Alexander had brought down with him. Priscilla was really on at the meeting because she was the highest ranking cell leader left in London, not forced on the ground. Sobering thought, to say the least, when considering that she wasn't even in her 30s. As she stroked her black hair, though, an idea came to us. What if I do it? She interrupted in a small voice. The two HMMLR leaders looked up at her in surprise. Bill Alexander gestured for her to continue, while Sterling looked her over with a fresh eye, as if searching for something he'd missed before. I mean, I walk through the square each day for work. The Bobies know me well enough that they won't think twice about why I'm going so close to the cordon. Griselda stopped and awaited the two's response. In the end, it was Sterling who answered with a short, "How familiar are you with grenade throwing?" Okay. Safety of the future speech minus 10%. Okay, most of the HMMLR are moderates, by any sense of the word, men and women who want freedom more than anything more pacific. But David Sterling and Bill Alexander have other goals. Sterling wants revenge. He's about the only surviving man still in the country who never surrendered, and he's lost a lot of friends for that stand. Bill Alexander wants his revolution, though he's willing to forgo that to get the Germans out of Britain for good. He lost a lot of friends in the Third Cable Street during the first uprising, but he survived, and he will have his turn to do the killing. Unlike me, meanwhile, he wants the traitor king's speech to be a proper show, complete with the HMMLR as the entertainment. Sterling and Alexander might hate the other's guts, but they are more experienced in guerrilla warfare than the rest of the HMMLR combined. Time for them to use it. Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Let's go ahead and infiltrate the palace again. Okay. It's pretty 50. It's 50-50 right now. I don't really want to use all of our pluck of power because we're actually losing it every day. Okay, at least we're still good there. We've got high relations. We've got 7,000 guns in the stockpile. Let's go ahead and send in agents. A plan in motion. He had no doubt that right, as he was standing over the map of London City. The reactionaries would be sending any one of the dozen raids after him in England's north. Just a shame they didn't realise he was in his basement, not a kilometre away from Buckingham Palace itself. William Alexander chuckled at the thought, gaining the attention of a man next to him. Sometimes Bill really regretted signing the left resistance up with the HMMLR, and any time he had to work personally with David Sterling only made the feeling resurface. The man was effective enough to be sure. Where even his comrades in the CPGB had failed, David Sterling had kept his commandos alive by sheer unrelenting determination for nearly 20 years. He was also ruthless and unconcerned with the civilian casualties, which made Bill's blood boil. He was also quite possibly mad. Bill had his men smuggle in the grenades days before he even arrived, and Philby had contacted Reg to say the reactionaries still thought Bill was around Manchester. Something to warn Wilson about, at least. He exposed himself unduly. Sterling, in turn, had escorted Bill down to the traitor central, as the ex-SAS referred to London. The king wouldn't like the welcome they had prepared for him, of that Bill was sure. Sterling was glancing at him to see if the chuckle had meant anything, but Bill just waved him off and gestured to both the local cell leader, Griselda, and Sterling to look back at the map. The evacuation point is a boat in the river which will take you north. You understand? Any unfinished business you have here should be completed before then, because you won't be coming back anytime soon, Bill spoke, continuing from where David had left off. To her credit, the young woman merely nodded. Bill was starting to have a good feeling about the whole exercise. He only hoped Claude was handling things in his absence. Let's get the party started. Almost there. The King's speech is shaping up to be quite the event. Some might want to break out the champagne and call it a day, but London is practically being isolated in preparation for it. The question on everyone's lip is, though, is why? Third Cable Street was years ago, and there hasn't been any real violence in London since. So it's like the government is worried about something. The press, for their part, are busy speculating and issuing declarations of solidarity, but some speculate as to whether it's quite necessary to block off all of London and put in curfews for what is the best part. Is at best a theoretical threat. The government, for its part, has decided that they will go ahead with the measures anyway. Okay, let's... Oh, the safety of the speech is not looking too great. Oh ho ho, we are going to kill Edward. No, we're probably not. But I would be interested if we assassinated him. Ho 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 ho! I can't wait to hopefully reform the UK. It should be fantastic. Well, what actually happens to the Garrison Authority? I think they disappear when Germany does. Of course, they've still got a lot of focuses to do. But saying that, we are fine right now anyways. And we're just going to chill. Edward listened as the chief of the City of London Police outlined his plans for security with something approaching a dull interest. The King of England didn't really know why the man insisted upon having so many rotations of guards about the location of the speech. But given recent events, Edward was inclined to listen. When Sir Edward reached Edward, whispers that the HMMLR intended to kill him at the speech, something that he had initially refused to believe. Surely no group loyal to his niece would kill the reigning monarch. At the same time, a voice in his head asked, what if they were right? Edward hadn't gotten any sleep for days. While Alice had noticed and started fretting, only making the whole affair worse. Edward had resolved to not have her present in the speech. That way, even if something did go wrong, she would not be in the line of fire. As for himself, well, as his brother had always been so fond of saying, he had a duty to attend. Griselda had memorised every guard rotation the Bobbies had, and Sterling had insisted upon it. Alexander had gone over the evacuation route with her and gotten her to warn her brother and mother ahead of time. Once he'd gotten assurance, says that they weren't likely to turn traitor. The main thing that Griselda had improved upon was her throwing skills. Where once she might have had the skill of something tough fresh out of a bar, she now had at least a basic grasp of issues like distance and timing needed before she ran. She was ready, and Griselda dearly hoped that would be enough. The die is cast. Let's do writing on the walls. One need only look at the streets of London to see how ripe the city is for revolution. It's like a bale of hay, only in need of a spark to set the entire house afire. The police are no problem. Those who aren't on our side will be dealt with by ones who are. If they can't be bribed into staying back, of course. The crowds, though, that was something Bill's lads solved. Turns out when you know half of the unions in the country, you can get a few of them to turn out and act as disruptive influences for a public event like this speech. With Sterling's lot acting as civvies to lead them, we ought to give the king a right surprise when he turns up for tea and biscuits, something this entire country will remember forever. A convenient illness. Oh my days, look at the safety. Available weapons, ours, 6,000. Let's put some more in. Send in our agents. I think we'll even infiltrate the palace again. Right, we probably... Is there any way to actually boost this? Possibly. Let's try and do a large gun shipment. We've got high relations with the OFN, so, you know, let's do it. Can we please assassinate Edward? Let's get rid of the traitorous king. Whoa, this could be it. I can't wait to form the UK. It's going to be good. And I'm going to get revenge on Germany. We're going to do it. A convenient illness. As Timothy O'Flaherty sat on the couch with a telly turned to some children's show, he reflected that maybe he should take a day off work more often. Not every month, or even every 6, but maybe once a year wouldn't do any harm. His daughter seemed ignorant of the fact that he was watching them instead of their mother, and had busied themselves assembling a dollhouse he bought them with. What he was telling Martha was a special bonus. And truth be told, it was a special bonus. It wasn't every day a man showed up at your door and offered you 500 quid to stay home on a specific day. Tim wouldn't have acted on it except for the fact he had He had caught several of the younger constables chatting amongst themselves on the subject. Upon some discreet inquiries, had even discovered his boss, the chief inspector, was taking the king's speech off. If everyone was doing, then why not Tim too? He could think of a lot of things he'd rather do than stand about in the line all day and watch the crowd riot. Something that was reinforced as his wife brought the tea tray out and set it on the table. Oh yes, no need to go into work today. Family can be its own reward. The king's speech. The day has come. King Edward of the House of Windsor may not be an overly well-liked man, but he is nonetheless King of England, and only England. The speech, it would appear, will start at midday and go on for an hour or so before His Majesty attends a late lunch with some notable public figures. Of course, that assumes everything goes to plan. Both HMMLR and the government know something will occur, but what exactly happens is up to the will of God at this point. The coin of history tosses and turns in the air, the face upon it which it will land unknown by even those who threw it. Perhaps HMMLR will be correct in their assumption that all the dry tinder needs is a spark, or perhaps the government prepared well. Who can say? Only one way to find out. No more preparations. Edward goes live. We will gain the ability to contest control of states via the decision menu. Oh, good. I guess what we'll do is for oh, we can't do it now. We can't actually do it. Cool. Got a large gun shipment coming in. Are we going to get a lot of guns from this? Oh, we bloody did the half. The OFN doing us bits. What a bunch of gems. Ho ho ho, the king's speech. I'm really curious to what's going to happen here. Is he going to die? Surely not. Surely we're not going to successfully assassinate him. Or maybe we will. But we'll definitely be trying to get control of, hopefully, these contested areas. Because if we can get them on our side, we've only got not much of the south to take. Courts. The great toss had been almost perfect, landing amongst the people behind the king rather than at the traitor's own feet, but the result had been impressive nonetheless. The king had been hustled off unharmed. His cronies had been so lucky. Griselda had gotten out of dodge quick with the help of Stirling's men and Alexander's smugglers, and we'd taken north. Deep into the north too, past Yorkshire. At least if she was to be any judge. It wasn't until Griselda entered the small house in the middle of nowhere, though, that she realised what her actions had truly meant. The men with her had talked about taking her to see the boss. And of the 5 people in the room, it was obvious who it was. It wasn't Bill Alexander standing aside with a beer in hand and chatting with a thin gentleman in a suit. It wasn't Stirling catching the first bit of sleep he'd seen in days. It was a figure almost every English citizen knew. Member of Parliament, Claude Auchinleck, a former general who had been the last British officer holding his position at the time of the surrender to Germany. A living legend in every sense of the word, and evidently leader of Her Majesty's most loyal resistance. Griselda gave a salute as she entered, but he waved it off and invited her to sit. They talked for a long time about how the sacrifice of civilian life was appreciated, her family had been evacuated along with the rest of her cell, and about her future career prospects. HMMLR had need of operatives to ferry communication between the cells. It couldn't be trusted to regular means, and according to Auchinleck, she fit the bill perfectly. Death to traitors. Boom! Assassination attempt on Edward. Ha ha ha, apparently God was fun the king this day. Yet sadly, he did not die. But, oh, Stirling's method. We await Mr. President. So we have this to get through. Not enough time. Will soon be time for the uprising to begin. So, what way are we going to go? Stirling, who dares win? That gets our strength up. Gain 20 support in the Midlands and Yorkshire. 2,000 guns. They lose 2,000 guns. Operation Bad Morning. Oh, we gain support there with Wingate. Stay in the north. Gain support and stability in Newcastle and Yorkshire. Dominate Lancashire. I think I'm going to stay with Claude's. We're going to go with Claude's strategy. But anyways, guys, I'm going to leave that episode there. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I shall be back very soon for some more. Until then, take care. Cheer bye. And then now.